Okay, then let's start and take a look into what we've done. So first interesting number, 74% of organizations fail to complete legacy system modernization projects. 74%, that's a huge number. And how does it come? It is really a complex task to deliver such a project with the scope, with the time and the budget. And how we did it, we will explain. At first, we have to think about where did we come from a business point of view and from a technical point of view, and where did we wanted to go. So let's take a look into the functional perspective. So Otto, a couple of years ago, was a very typical retailer company. So we were purchasing worldwide from our suppliers goods. We did the disposition, and we also had our own logistics. We did the payment handling and the presenting in our web shop on Otto.de, based mainly in Germany. But where did we wanted to go? So we wanted to become something like a marketplace, or even more become a platform. What is the idea about that? As a normal retailer, we had the problem that we were not able to scale anymore as much as we wanted. So our customers were used that we only offer a limited product range. So we are a universalist, but still we have not the possibility to provide anything about fashion, technology, living, and so on, and all the other categories. So we wanted to make it possible for our customers to really bring everything that they could desire to our platform. And on the other side, we had a lot of suppliers who said we would like to have more responsibility with the interaction with the customers. And so we opened up, wanted to open up to a marketplace where our partners have the ability to make their own business with our customers, and on the other side, give our customers the benefit of having a really broad product range, and also bringing both together in a really easy and good way. So you could ask, is that the same as other big marketplaces? So the big change is that we really have a higher quality level, and we want to be much more fair to the partners and our customers. That is what we are really trying to achieve. So this is the business strategy. What about the technical lens? So 3 years ago, we had a very monolithic approach. So we had our web shop that was already been redesigned with a modern microservice approach based in the AWS cloud. And we had our backend, which was mainly a monolith with a big Java enterprise application with a big Oracle database beside that. Um, Even in that single application, more than 15 teams with more than 150 people were working, and all the dependencies are just managed via Java dependencies. The teams had even access to the other teams' database schemas. Lots of PLSQL was also included. And we had also a very tightly coupled release cycle. So all the teams went live together with a release cycle of 2 months. Because it's only one Java application, so not everybody could deploy on its own. And with this own single Java application, also the technology freedom was limited. So everybody has to stick to the same Java version, has to use the same Java libraries, and so on. So that was something we really wanted to change into distributed systems with really product owning teams. So we wanted to change the hosting, so no own data centers anymore. Go into the cloud, AWS at first. We want to have much more technology freedom and innovation in our teams. so that every team can bring out new decisions and new technologies whenever they need them, and maybe other teams can then learn and adapt them. Of course, release management, we don't want to have the strict release cycles anymore, and every team can deploy on its own. And we really wanted to use continuous deployment. That also means a lot of quality regarding automatic testing is required. And that also means that we want to have distributed testing strategy and not one big testing cycle where everything is joined together. And operation is completely different. As really we wanted to have DevOps in the teams. The team is completely responsible for building, for running, and maintenance as well. So this journey then started with this transformation journey, and it was handled in specific phases, and each phase has its own challenges. So we started with a pre-project with only 9 people for 3 months, which mainly set up everything. Then we went further with the MVP, really bringing something to life. And then it went further to ready to scale, and then growing bigger, and now it's exploding, I would say. Let's take a look into the pre-project.
Thank you, Christian, for setting the context so far. So the first phase in the transformation journey is often the most challenging one, right? A strong foundation is going to help us set the course and the motivations right. There are a lot of interesting questions that need to be answered during this phase. For example, what is the most important business use case that we should be picking up, right? How do we bootstrap the right technology strategy just enough to get started and open enough to extend in the future, right? How does the capability matrix look like? Do we have the right talent within the organization to seed the program? And many, many more such concerns, right? At Otto, we call this as the pre-project phase, right? The first learning that I would say that emerges out of this is knowing thy business and knowing thy goals, right? What business process to prioritize for transformation, as I said earlier, is a very important aspect of this phase. And in order to do that, we need a right team, which is a mixture of technical folks or business folks or product folks, right? One important aspect to understand is that people can be extremely wary of the transformation effort. It also depends upon the power play between various departments. And in such a scenario, what would be the best way to create a safe environment such that everyone contributes to their best? And that becomes an important challenge to solve. The mechanics of that process can vary. For instance, at Otto, everyone loves event storming. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of event storming. You can Google it up. It's a fantastic technique to do domain modeling these days, right? But think of this technique of event storming as a means to an end, right? To arrive at the right domain model for the business process that we have prioritized. This was a technique that we leveraged, right? And there are a few learnings that are absolutely noteworthy from this particular phase. While we stormed the order to cash process, so in the retail world, order to cash process is like a normal process for when a customer places an order to the payment and then the shipment, right? Like this is like an acronym for order to cash process. So we hired event storming experts, right? Some external consultancy to help the colleagues do the storm for 3 days, right? And this also sort of addresses the challenge of creating that safe environment that I was talking about earlier. These folks started off with a very detailed view of the events that were happening in the entire order to cash process, right? So the next challenge was to create a concise context map, right? Context map in the domain-driven design parlance is a map that shows dependencies between the various bounded contexts, which and talks about the events that happen at the boundary, like the interactions between the various uh, subdomains within a big, larger domain, right? So the challenge was to come up with a context map out of the event storm or the event journey that we had created. So what we did for that was we asked these people, which was like a set of 30 people, to create a context map each in a limited amount of time, right? We also rotated people within these groups, and later on we did the consolidation of the 3 context maps produced by 3 different groups And this was particularly useful because of this. From a very detailed view of the event journey, we were able to create the first version of the context map, right? And that context map definitely provided a lot of clarity on the teams that were needed to kickstart the transformation journey, right? And therefore, the next learning that's also worthy from this particular phase of the transformation journey is related to technology, right? Which is about the tech governance or the foundation of tech governance. One caution here is that it's not about control, right? It's not about restrictions. It's about laying down the constructs of tech governance. It is more a means to align on core guiding values and principles that will help the teams take their own decisions, right? So it should not be understood as control. It should be understood as some guidelines which are going to help the teams to make those decisions on the ground, right? So the technical manifest is, as we like to call it at Otto, in its earlier stage or in its initial stage was a collection of values and principles, as you can see on your screen, right? And these are important for each and every team to understand. And there's a big reason behind that. Why? But first, let's understand these terms, right? Values. Values influence my thought process, my mental models, and principles influence how I can consciously apply those values in my actions, right? So, on a similar note, right, architectural values may or may not have a direct impact on the architecture, but they do manifest themselves in one or more principles, right, which in turn influence the tech decisions that the teams are going to take on the ground. For example, if you see full ownership and clear responsibility, this is a value. Now, this has a manifestation in how we evangelize domain-driven design. How do we do the slicing of our domains? How we identify the aggregate boundaries such as to minimize dependency between the teams, right? Similarly, look at the value low technical barriers, right? Now, this as a value statement guides us to choose the managed services that a given cloud provider can provide, right? For instance, in our case, it was AWS. So we said that we would want to be AWS first, right? That means we would want to use the managed services from AWS rather than inventing something of our own or hosting something of our own, such that we can lower the technical barrier for the teams, right? During this phase, I would imagine that the discussion was far more important as the teams sort of internalized this manifest, right? Because it's important to know that usually the seed team members are leveraged to scale the teams at a later point of time, right? Hence, in hindsight, internalizing this manifest was a very critical success enabler. And the next learning that's worth talking from this phase is being comfortable with the unknowns, or so to say, in embracing the being agile mindset. The biggest challenge was getting comfortable with the unknowns, right? Where do you draw the boundaries of initial discovery? When to stop the ideation, right? These are critical questions. There is always a push and pull. Should I know more? Should I know more before I can start something, or should I just deep dive, right? So where to stop that? What is that boundary of initial discovery? Important to really understand, right? So based on the event storm that I was talking about earlier, for the most important business use case, which was order to cash process, we did come up with what were the first, contexts that are going to be required. What bounded contexts are important to achieve the outcome, right? It gave us a sense of how many teams are needed to be formed for the same. There were definitely certain unknowns around the need for some contexts like payments or order check that you can see as a question mark on your screen, right? But overall, we did agree on a strangler approach to carve out these functionalities out of the core. So core, as you can see on the screen, is the large monolithic application that Christian explained at the beginning, right? Which was the Java J2EE monolithic application, which we were trying to break down or strangle functionality out into the modern new world, right? So core was the system of truth at that point of time. And the strategy was to asynchronously get the data from core into the new transformed world on the left-hand side with the help of event-driven architectures, right? At that point of time, the idea was to also relate all the patterns that we were adopting with the technical manifest as we described earlier. For instance, the order bounded context should not depend upon the customer bounded context for the shipping address, right? So in the true sense of domain driven design, each domain should be able to reliably handle data. So I would say that reliability was prioritized higher than the data replication. So different teams can have the same data from their own lens so that they can be much more reliable and in the event of a failure of another team, right? We also knew that a seller facing API would be required for enabling communication with the marketplace, right? So each bounded context, like the orders, receipts, which were owned by a single team, the same team was also responsible for exposing its domain API in the context of the partner or the seller. For example, the order bounded context team would own the customer facing order related function and also the partner facing external API. With that, I pass over to Christian to talk about MVP.
Yes, thank you, Vanya. So in this MVP, what did we do there? So what we wanted to do is really bring something alive, and we wanted to find out if our approach is really working. If we would find out early at this process that our approach is maybe wrong, then we would have the time to choose a different one. So that was really important to find out if is this approach working. So for that, we needed to find out, okay, how can we operationalize that? What is the functional scope that is really important for this MVP? How do we guide all these teams with all these different people and so on? And that was really tough at the beginning with lots of discussions. So let's take a look into that. So at first we need to find out, okay, what is important for us and what is not so important for us during this MVP phase. And we did something like that. So you can see, for example, the costs are not that important at this point. Of course, everything should not cost, should cost trillions of dollars, but it is not so important as, for example, time to market. We knew we need to find out this quick, and we want to be fast enough for our partners to be important. So that was really important. And we wanted to find out if our development approach is really working. Does it really work to have these independent teams, which have a lot of responsibility within their teams? Reusability on the other side was not important at all. We said we accept that sometimes things get developed twice, but it is faster to develop something twice than two teams and maybe even more teams have to discuss and agree on a solution that they could all accept. So we choose not to use any synergies that could be possible. Then let's take a look into the next part. We were a company where we had a lot of business people, we had of IT people, and we wanted to bring that much nearer together in our product teams. So we need also to build some trust that we are really able to do that. And therefore, we needed to find out, okay, what is the part that we really need functionally, and it should be in a working mode where we decide that together. And what we did is we asked our business department which features are important for this MVP, what needs to be included and what can be implemented later. And then you get such a diagram where you have normally the priorities. These are must-haves. These are also really important. This is important too, and lots of more important priorities. And then at the end, there's this nice to have priority, which is usually empty. And we needed to find out, okay, what is really the part that is important for us? And we can take a look into these features really. And what we did is, we really included only these must-haves, and that is painful. So for example, we knew we need an order management. So we need the possibilities to present our partners which orders have been placed by our customers. But even a cancellation process within this MVP was not existent. So our customers could not say after placing an order that they don't want it anymore. At the beginning, this was just not possible without manual processes. But by really restricting to an MVP with more or less only the happy path, we were really able to achieve something that is worthful and that really at this point already earned money. Let's take a look at this tech transformation. What do we mean with that? We didn't see this as a tech program where we said we only wanted to migrate from one software to another. We also had this change of our business model, and we wanted to become a complete different kind of company. And there are different aspects which we can take a look on. So from architecture point of view, we already talked about. So we wanted to be much more distributed with distributed teams where they can where we don't have to um, think through all the requirements from a top level, to bottom approach. We want to be able that the teams by themselves can think about improvements of their products, and then decentralized, everything grows and grows and gets better. The other part is the infrastructure and the technology part. So we had a based on our past with this monolithic approach, we had a little bit the feeling that we were, let's call it like this, uncool. So our developers really used not the most up-to-date technologies. The business people always had the feeling it is slow. And now uh, we came to the point where the teams, the business department and the teams, the development teams were one. So you cannot say anymore this team is slow because you are part of this team, and if you would say it is slow, then you are slow as well. um, Also now the people really can choose which technologies really fit their needs, and that also makes, to say it like this, it just makes fun to do that, and it also enables your developers that they have fun in working for you. And from an organizational point of view, yeah, we have all the responsibility, all the costs, and so on in the teams with all the cross-functional people. That was really important to really establish during this phase. Okay. Next part is then. Can you switch further, please? Yes. Next part is then balancing the world. So, yeah, as we said, we had this infrastructure built with our big J2E Java platform, and we are building something new beside that. And there you come to the point where you find out you don't have unlimited amount of people, and you will have to find out, okay, how do I manage that I get people who said, yeah, I'm really inspired making something new. I also can live with all this stress and uncertainty with something new. You want to have such people on board of for building this new part. On the other side, you don't want to have the on the other side, you want to have people who say, yeah, I really like optimizing the rest out of this application. I want to make sure that everything runs smoothly, that we really earn our money, which we are currently earning with the COM platform, that this is all working. And motivation and communication is really important there. If you say something, which I also sometimes accidentally do, yeah, we have these old systems and we have these new systems, and we have these people working on this old system, and then this old system is at some point in future not existing anymore. That should not mean that these people then are also not existing anymore. We all have a lot of people, and we need to provide everybody a perspective, and everybody will be required on specific parts of the application landscape. And in future, everybody will be required to develop on the new application part. So communication is very tricky there. Um, so then really difficult, and that is something that I really discuss a lot with architects from other company when I tell them that we are doing a lot of things decentralized, and a decentralized tech strategy is often referred to, okay, then you don't have a tech strategy at all. And it is not like that. Let's take a look at this picture. In the upper left part of this picture, we have a really typical military approach, I could say. There's a general, and he says, we need to cross a river, build a bridge. And then these people are going out and building a bridge. They are at least knowing they are doing something that is wanted. They have not much freedom, but they are working. On the bottom right part, there's the variant where we have a high autonomy, but little alignment. Um, that means we just there's no really alignment, so the general is just hoping that something good comes out, and the people are just all trying to do something good. They are autonomously working. They are all searching for problems, and they are, I suppose, solving them. So very often that feels very good to the employees. But maybe they are not really working on the biggest problems and not on the important problems. So we need something where we have a high autonomy and high alignment. That means we must make sure that everybody understands what is important. So we need to cross the river, but not how we need to cross the river. The solution is not already given. So please already, people, think about good solutions and find the best one and then implement that one. And we also find out that this kind of work model also makes most of the fun and gives best results. And what does it mean now in our organization? So top left, you see a lot of product team responsibilities. They are responsible for their own AWS accounts, for DevOps, for developing their microservices, for data transfer, for testing, for example, with consumer-driven contracts, CDCs, monitoring, and a lot more. On the other side, on the right side, we have a lot of topics where we thought about, okay, there's some governance is required, some guidance to the teams. And we always have the same kind of working model. So together with the teams, we find out, okay, which guidance do you need? Then let's think about how could that guidance look like, and then build something for that. So, for example, security belt. That is something where we together discovered what kind of security requirements do we all have, and how to implement them, or what kind of things you have to think about. And then we have yeah, a typical a list of all these things, and all the teams then know them and can then do something like a self-assessment and tell, yes, I thought about it, and I'm pretty sure that I've done it good. Then we have peer reviews. So not everything is then reviewed by me and Vanya or others. It is reviewed by the teams themselves. So, for example, we couple teams together, and then one team reviews all these non-functional requirements of another team. And that leads to the fact that you have some knowledge exchange. And of course, you also have the fact that there's something like developer honor, I would say. So when you present some of your code and your approaches to a person which has the same understanding and technology insights as yourself, then you want to make sure that it looks okay. That you don't want to be embarrassed when you present that. So you make sure that you really be prepared for that, and then you explain that. And you explain that to somebody who has really the same understanding. Maybe I'm not so deep anymore in every technical details, but that person definitely is. So these peer reviews work relatively well. We have guides for our API, how to develop an API for our partners. We have go live checklists with topics like you have to do a performance test, you have to do this and that, and all these things have been built by the teams themselves. So it's not that I or Vanya have just said, think about this, think about that. And this kind of strategy um, works pretty well. Okay, then let's take a look to the next part, to the next phase then.
Okay, thank you, Christian. I think we have spoken about the MVP phase so far. Now we are talking about the third phase in our transformation journey. And I would say that a successful MVP has heightened everyone's spirits, right? With our MVP in case of Otto, we went live with 2 partners, so 2 sellers on the marketplace, and with end customers being able to buy their products, right? So that was like the success criteria for our MVP. But the question now remains that what we did to prove the feasibility for 2 partners, is it going to be enough to scale to say 10,000 partners, right? That too in another year. What did we do for a single payment method? How do we replicate that success, say, for 5 more payment methods? And the MVP that we delivered with 5 to 6 domain teams. Now, what does it really mean to have, say, 12 plus teams? How does collaboration look like? What does communication look like? What are the governance structures that we really need to have? Yeah, so all those questions were absolutely open, right? And as we prepared to scale our program, and then I would say that scaling and more or so right scaling, comes along with a variety of challenges. And I would like to bucket them into 3 different categories. The first one is about the scaling of the teams, right? Which involves how do you form new teams? How do you scale the capability model to staff those teams, right? The second category that I would like to talk about is how do you scale the decentralized tech governance, right? Which talks about standardization. How do we establish those sensible defaults, right? How do we have those governance bodies which can help us, stay on course, which can help us make sure that we are sticking to those guidelines. And all of this, right? All of this still exists within the autonomous nature of the entire ecosystem, right? We remember that we are still working with the autonomous teams, right? And the last but not the least, the third category is about scaling the platform capabilities such that we can bring in more holistic systems view, right? So now let's take a deeper look at the learnings that came out of this phase. And first things first, our revised trade-off sliders, right? So I would start with this, that I'm a big fan of evolutionary architecture concepts, and I like to think of it as a fundament of any rational decision making, right? I'd like to say that there is always a trade-off, and those trade-offs are always evolving. If you remember, Christian spoke about the trade-offs which we put in sight when we started talking about the MVP, right? But now when we started to talk about the ready to scale phase, we were talking about the same characteristics or same pivots, but they were at a very different equation with each other at this point of time, right? So if you see on this slide, the peach color or the orange color box is the previous trade-off value that we had in the MVP phase, and the blue block that you can see would give you a new rating of this particular trade-off on the slider, right? So as you can already notice, during the MVP phase, reuse, consistency, and maintainability were largely towards the left-hand side, which was about that they were most negotiable. We did not worry if their code was getting duplicated because that was not important during the MVP phase. But you can see now that during the ready-to-scale phase, this specific attribute of reuse and consistency has climbed in importance, right? Imagine this. When we scale with 15 autonomous teams, the chaos, which was probably okay, in terms of, say, proliferation of tech stack across the teams, right? It would have been okay with 5 teams, but with 15 teams, it's going to get really, really unruly, right? And another interesting highlight on this slider is the position of cost, right? During MVP, establishing trust was most important, right? Billing and cloud costs were largely unmonitored, but with more and more teams joining the transformation program, these costs also needed some governance, right? But again, remember, they were still at the team level, but we wanted to add some governance on top of them. So you can see that they were cost trade-off also climbed in importance from a trade-off slider perspective, right? Now, it's important to understand that we picked our best motivated and driven people to make MVP a success, right? We seeded these teams with AWS experts, software developers with proven XP skills. But now, today, in the ready to scale phase, as more and more teams are formed, they get staffed with folks from the old monolithic world. I can imagine Christian doesn't like this term, old monolithic world, but that's a hard reality, right? More and more people, as if you remember that graph, the number of people working in the old systems is going to go down eventually, and they're going to come inside the new transformed world and new ways of working and the new teams that are forming, right? But the important question is, how do we latch on to the same quality and practices, right? With more and more people joining the program, how do we ensure that new teams can benefit from the experience of the MVP teams, right? How do we gradually bring in aspects of maintainability, talent availability, and consistency across the board with regards to the tech stack? How do we start to optimize for the global maxima of the organization rather than the locality of the individual teams, right? There is often this mentality, right? Oh, this tech stack is cool, right? How do we move away from that thought process to this tech stack is cool to this tech stack is right for my job, right? And how do we sort of start to look at cross-cutting concerns like tracing, monitoring, quality, right? With distributed systems, you can imagine that all these cross-cutting concerns are absolutely important, right? And the fact that we are working in an autonomous ecosystem, who is looking at these holistic system requirements across the business teams that are participating in business flows? So those were the questions that we were starting to look at, right? And therefore, the next learning that we present was one of our first steps in that direction, which was establishing the sensible defaults for Otto, right? And what this means is a set of technologies that have been identified over a period of time, to be successful and fit for the purpose at hand. If the problem space that your team is trying to solve sits well in the existing problem space, the encouragement and recommendation is to use the sensible defaults. Please remember, sensible defaults are never a mandate. It's just a default starting point. If you like it, you use it. Otherwise, you're always free to use a technology which is most suitable for your problem space, right? But as part of this establishing the sensible defaults, we did an exercise called Tech Radar, right? We built a Tech Radar with the program teams for Otto. So the Tech Radar is nothing but it's a structure which comprises of aspects from the software industry, which range from techniques, tools, platforms, languages, and frameworks. And as I said earlier, this artifact can also be created at the organization level, which is also called as build your own radar. And with this decentralized exercise with the product teams, we were able to create or establish our sensible defaults. This helped many new and old teams in taking decisions faster. For example, for the container runtime technology, the defaults that emerged were, say, ECS Fargate and EKS. These are both services from the Amazon Cloud ecosystem. So the important thing about this is that the newer teams which were joining the program did not have to redo the spike over and over again, and they could get to delivering business value much faster, right? We also laid down structures where we identified which capabilities are strong in which teams, so that the newer teams could reach out to those people to seek guidance, right? We also laid down a process to ensure that these defaults are not stagnant, right? It's always evolving, such that we do not strangle any innovation at the teams, right? So it was like an evolving sensible default. Today also, right, we can tell you that this gets revised based on the input from the product teams every 4 to 5 months, right? Sensible defaults, as I said, was one of our first steps in that journey. Nevertheless, there were, a few more questions that were needed to be addressed, right? As I said earlier, how do we optimize for the global maxima, right, rather than the locality of the individual teams? And to address this specific question, we established a small group of people called the Architecture Governance Board, right? Christian provided a wonderful diagram on a relationship between alignment and autonomy. At scale, right? At scale, what we really need is alignment. Alignment across different departments, different teams, and most importantly, between the tech leadership and the management folks, right? And this architecture board provided us with the right forum to discuss strategic technical topics, take on initiatives that were relevant for all teams. And since this forum had representation from all the functional departments, it led to a fantastic cross-pollination of ideas, learning from each other's journey, bringing together operational and tactical topics in one round. One interesting example of this was interface between the marketplace and the payment hub. So payment hub is the new organization that is being carved out of the Otto ecosystem, called as Otto Payments, because now they are a marketplace and they really need to handle payments and money. So it needs a banking license, and hence a different organization is being carved out. So think about it, like there is a payment provider and then there is the marketplace which needs to handle payments. So what should be the right interface between these two entities, right? So this was one of the topics that we undertook at the architecture board level, which led to the development of API standards and communication patterns between the marketplace and the auto payment organization, right? This was just to give you an example, the kind of topics that we handled at this specific forum, right? I think the next topic that we would like to talk about is governance, right? Or rather cloud governance. I would say that cloud governance comes in various shapes and sizes. And for Otto, it meant considering three main aspects. The first one was monitoring the cloud subscription bill, right? The second one was visibility on what departments, teams are using what services from which cloud provider, right? Implementing cloud adoption best practices for the enterprise, and especially guidance on compliance, because we need to think about GDPR, because this particular organization is in the EU region, right, Germany. So I think these were the important aspects of cloud governance at scale. And at Otto, for the ready to scale phase in which we are talking about right now, we looked at these specific examples, right? GAS stands for governance at scale. It's an acronym for governance at scale. And the first one was consolidating the billing for AWS accounts owned by the different teams. If you remember the holistic technical architecture, different teams owned their own AWS accounts, right? So as part of cloud governance, what we made sure that was that we need to have a single pair AWS account in the AWS organization hierarchy, right? This helped, in procuring better discounts. This also helped in reducing the costs, right? The second example is related to the AWS organization-wide config rules, or service policies, service control policies, as you like to call it, right? That were incrementally set up, right? Which also used to generate automated alerts for the GAS team, example on some thresholds on the size of EC2 instance, or if an S3 bucket has been left public, things like that. And earlier, each and every team used to manage their user management accounts themselves, right? Or the IAM, identity and access management themselves, in their own specific AWS account. And as part of the governance at scale, this was modified to allow for a single sign-on with Otto's Active Directory system for authentication, right? Now, this meant that different teams now do not have to worry about getting IAM roles or getting users authenticated. It would now happen with a single sign-on with the Otto ADFS, right? This meant ease of onboarding and offboarding people. And last but not the least, CloudTrail was globally enabled for all the organization to allow for monitoring of unintended access. Moving on, right? This learning, I often say, is rather my favorite. I'm extremely passionate about observability as a cross-functional requirement. And one of the challenges that we're staring at during the MVP phase was inconsistent log retention amongst the different teams, right? As we said, different teams were autonomous teams, different teams were using different standards. So we were looking at inconsistency in managing the retention period. So imagine this, if an individual team's AWS accounts were to be compromised, the access logs would also be lost, as many teams were only using CloudWatch, right? This meant that we would be unable to do root cause analysis across the teams for a given business process, right? Because for a given business process, inadvertently, you would have multiple teams participating in that, right? In a distributed ecosystem. So if we talk in terms of the 4 key metrics, right, we could have a severely higher mean time to recover because we do not have good searchable logs, right? And hence, we would like to really bring this as a first-class learning in itself when we speak about being ready for scale, right? So as mentioned earlier, we needed a way to move focus from a team view to an overarching systems view. And few of the initiatives that we undertook for this were enhancing the traceability of the entire system across teams for a given business process, and enhancing the debuggability of the overall system with log aggregation at one place. And for the traceability part, we used open tracing. This particular thing is still under implementation, where different teams are now coordinating to look at how should they contribute to the trace across the business process with the help of open tracing. And now we are also starting to aggregate our business logs, right? Whatever are the business events that are emitted by each and every team into Splunk, such that we can do sort of log aggregation across the teams, right? So that we have better searchable logs. So these are definitely, two important learnings when we talk about, reactive systems and observability as a whole. Besides observability, there are many other cross-functional requirements. And as mentioned earlier, at the MVP phase, we had only two partners or two sellers onto the system. And the scale or the load on the system was not anywhere close to a peak reality of what Otto experiences today in its retailer ecosystem, right? And in order to create that awareness amongst the teams, we created a task force in the architecture board to come up with a single view of cross-functional requirements, which were, at the marketplace level, not at the team level, but at the entire marketplace level. And as you can see on your screen, they were a mix of business and technical aspects, right? It was, and to do that, we took a three-pronged approach. We got feedback on these important metrics, on these important non-functional requirements from the product teams. Then we socialized this across all the community forums. So at Otto, we do have a lot of community building activities where we have architecture guilds, right, where we discuss architectural topics. Then there is an API community of practice where we discuss the API guidelines and review the API that are being developed by the teams. There is a tech lead round, and there are many, many more such guilds, right? So we socialized this specific set of non-functional requirements across all these guilds to gather feedback and also to socialize with the teams, right? And last but not the least, we also helped the teams to derive what it really means to serve up these numbers, right? For example, if during 2020, we are expecting 5 lakh partner products to be available in the system. What does that really mean for, say, the order management context? What does that really mean for, say, the receipts context, right? So we help derive those numbers for the individual teams as well. Last but not the least, people enablement can be a deal breaker, right? So it's really important to form right teams with the right mindset. And therefore, we looked at a lot of capability development initiatives, right? We understood that domain-driven design is important for us, right? Because we wanted to help create a lot of practitioners within the Otto ecosystem who understood domain-driven design really well. So we invested a lot in AWS trainings or domain-driven design trainings, right? As I was mentioning earlier, we amplified a lot of guilds, communities of practice, such that organic knowledge transfer can happen across the board, right? Teams would come forward and talk about their architecture, talk about their achievements, and helped create that learning for the other teams that were just starting up, right? This also helped us in creating a lot of intrinsic motivation within the ecosystem, right? If you remember, Christian did speak about this, that motivation is extremely crucial, right? Teams need to feel motivated. And one of the most important ways to create that motivation is to make them feel in charge, right? That they are in charge of what they are doing, and they are in charge of their architecture, they are in charge of their tech stack. And I think that helped us in creating that motivation. And last but not the least, optimal team setup, right? As more and more people who are not used to agile ways of working or who are not used to the cloud ways of working get into the teams, it was very important for us to balance the team in the right way, right? That we should have people who can help enabling the colleagues that have not worked in those environments, right? So an optimal team setup where we were balancing the domain expert from the old monolithic world into a new team with a reduced, context, but with new ways of working, right? So we were very careful about how do we set up our cross-functional teams to have the right domain expertise, but at the same time have the right people who could take the team forward on the new ways of working, on CI/CD, on how every commit can go to production, and many, many more such things, right? Right now, today, Otto is in the 4th phase where we are scaling or expanding beyond a single department, right? More and more departments are getting impacted by the overall transformation journey from being a retailer to being a marketplace like Amazon, right? Like everybody understands Amazon. So think about it, that Otto is also building or becoming the Amazon of Germany, right? So we are trying to become that. And in this phase, there are more and more deeper challenges. For example, earlier we were completely an AWS shop, right? But now we want to diversify our cloud strategy, right? We would want to now also look at what are the capabilities provided by other cloud providers and try to see which teams can now move to GCP as more and more teams are getting started, because probably there are certain services which are better in the GCP world. Right now, we are now aligning our transformation strategy across the departments. Right now, we are aligning our business goals or shooters, as we like to call it at Otto, right, which is like a 3-monthly planning cycle, which helps all the departments across the Otto ecosystem to align on what are the priorities, right? So we are now scaling our wings and trying to solve more and more problems. But for the purposes of this talk, this is where we stop, because we are still in the process of making those learnings. And I would like to say that transformation journey is like a long road to walk. It does not happen overnight. It has what is it, Christian? It's already like a 3-year journey that we are into, and it's going to continue for, I'm hoping, multiple more years. And we would like to provide more information about it on our next talk. And with that, we can take more and more questions. And I should stop share so that you can see us nice and big. There's a question in the chat.
There's one in the Q&A as well.
Go for it, Christian.
I can try to answer it. So I understand the question like that since this business model and our application landscape is scaling very rapidly, how do we handle that? And at first, you're true. Our business model is scaling really, really strong. So our amount of partners has already increased to over 1,000, and it is increasing at least by times of 3 every year. So that is really a challenge. So one of the answers is that we are leveraging the cloud technologies, and we are having our tech manifest where we stated that everything is that every team is encouraged to use the high level AWS services first, because they scale good, and they have also good availability. And also whenever we develop our microservices or serverless applications, that we think about horizontal scaling. So that is really important. We also have that all the teams do the performance tests. And since we, with our distributed setup, we also have the feeling that we need additionally some centralized performance tests. We have created a team for that as well now, which really tests some overarching use cases, placing an order till the partner receives it, or including fulfillment and so on. So these are some of the answers for that.
Right. If I can add, Christian, in our technical manifest, we do talk about a value or a principle called evolutionary architectures, right? So at any point of time when we are designing a system for the given business needs that we are prioritizing, we know how to evolve that in the future, right? I think that's the most important bit in an enterprise modernization strategy, that you always keep your system in a state where it can evolve in a very nimble manner from one state to the other, right? So I would imagine it's not a trade-off to be managed. It is, I mean, there are always trade-offs to be managed, but those trade-offs are evolving, and hence following the ideology of being evolutionary or evolutionary architecture paradigm helps us manage those trade-offs better as we scale. Okay.
Any more questions?
There's a question. Is a mixed cloud offering idea or approach a post-analysis, business-driven decision, or purely from a tech standpoint? Christian, can I take that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I would say that a mixed cloud strategy is from both the ways, right? It's top down as well as bottoms up. Top down because if we are only one cloud shop, right, it becomes a challenge for the organization to negotiate on a lot of discounts, or you want to be able to break the monopoly, right? So you would want, as an organization, you would not want to put all your eggs in one basket, and that's where you would want to diversify on your cloud strategy, right? You would want to bring in multiple cloud vendors into the ecosystem to create a fair balance and check the monopoly that one person or one particular vendor can exercise. And at the same time, right, as I said earlier, as more departments joined this program, right, there were certain needs that were better handled by, say, GCP, right? And therefore, it was important for us from a technical standpoint also to leverage few of the services from the GCP ecosystem for some of the teams, right? For example, to give you an example, the entire business intelligence department at Otto is completely on GCP, right? Because we believe, based on our analysis, that the data offerings from GCP are slightly better. Don't quote me for that, but that's the experience that we have made, are better, and hence the entire data analysis stack is on GCP, right? So that ways we have diversified our cloud strategy, giving teams more options to sort of choose what is the best cloud provider that they can choose. Yeah, Christian, you want to add anything on that?
Maybe to add, what we are currently not doing is that every team has to use several clouds simultaneously. So it's more the freedom for every team to decide which cloud provider they feel is the best fitting for them, and then they stick to that one.
Exactly. Come on, people, more questions. Either everything was crystal clear or nothing was clear. No worries. I think it's totally all right. If you have any more questions, do feel free to reach out to us on our. Let me just share our screen again with our Twitter handles. So you can reach out to us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I think we'd be happy to answer any more questions over there as well, right? And here is our. Okay, there's another question. How much percentage of infra cost optimization was achieved with cloud migration? Christian?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because from our migration strategy, you see that right now we have only additional business models on the cloud. So our whole partner business with our marketplaces in the cloud. And right now we are in the middle of the phase where we also migrating our retailer business into this new application landscape in the cloud. And when we have done that, then we could really answer this question. But I would like to stress out that going into the cloud should not be seen as a cost optimization project. It should be seen as an investment into development speed. So what we really wanted to achieve is that we can be faster in developing new features, and that really is true. We are it's much easier for our teams now to develop something, a new application, think about serverless application especially, without thinking about how do I hire some on-prem resources and all this stuff. So that is from my perspective the main advantage of cloud.
Absolutely. I love the way, Christian, you formulated that cloud migration should not be looked at like a cost optimization thing, right? And it's often not, right? You can imagine that the cost can increase, right? But at the same time, what you're offsetting it with is faster time to market, right? Bringing value in the hands of the customers on every day basis versus say 2 months or 3 months earlier is a much more valuable proposition than just looking at how the costs have reduced, right? So even if the costs have increased, have we seen better 4 key metrics? Have we seen value getting delivered faster? I think those are the important KPIs that we need to manage or track while we talk about such modernization projects. There's another one in the chat, Christian.
Oh.
How energy and performance are related with each other. Do you mean cloud energy consumption? You mean like is that what you mean? Yes. Okay. I'll try to answer that, Christian, once. Okay. So I think it's a very interesting question. I can add some perspective on this from being from ThoughtWorks. So I think ThoughtWorks is working on a green cloud sustainability initiative where we have developed some software to help analyze our carbon emissions, right? And yes, you're right. With higher compute or higher um, power machines that we use on the cloud, we are going to have a higher carbon footprint and higher energy consumption for sure, right? So they are definitely related. And we are not doing anything at Otto right now to talk about that, but we do talk about, in terms of performance as a non-functional requirement to say, if we have created an over-provisioned infrastructure or an under-provisioned infrastructure, so we do try to manage the infrastructure at the most optimum level, right? So our auto-scaling policies are created in such a way that we are not idling away the compute or idling away the memory for that matter, right? So mostly we are using serverless, right? ECS Fargate is a serverless managed container service from AWS. And we can write very interesting scaling policies, scale in, scale out and scale in policies such that we can expand there when there is a load on the system, and we can just give away any additional compute if there is less load. So I think that's how we are trying to balance our energy consumption and not have a higher carbon emission. I'm not sure, Suraj, if I have answered your question, but I'm hoping that's the direction that you are going towards. All right. Folks, we can keep on answering questions like this, but do let us know when you want to stop, right? Okay, there's another question. Christian, how would you differentiate between on-premise cloud versus managed cloud? Would you add some pros and cons? Christian, would you want to do that?
So our on-prem landscape indeed looked like an in-house cloud. So we had different approaches, and in all the cases, it was like that the teams could request either their applications or the infrastructure, or that they could just deploy Docker containers either into Kubernetes or other platforms like that. Still, it is really hard to achieve the same level of professionalism as professional cloud providers like AWS or GCP do that. So even if you think, okay, then we build something for the development teams, a nice UI where they can request that, where they can see how what kind of logs are happening and so on. You're always slower than the typical cloud providers. So I would say I'm really happy to have moved into the cloud and to use all these higher level services with so much more quality than we ever could have provided by our own. About the different cloud providers, so we have indeed checked GCP, AWS, and Azure, and not all at the same time, but with AWS we started first because at that point they looked most promising. In between, GCP also was really good developed, and now as we thought about choosing another one, we choose GCP as a second one, and right now we are happy with that. If at some point in the future we would find out, okay, another cloud provider, for example, like Azure, would provide something really beneficial that the others two would not offer, we might choose to support that as well for our teams. But right now we are really happy with GCP and AWS. And I would also encourage everybody to use multiple cloud providers, not within any other, not within every application itself, but having both in your company makes a lot of things easier. It makes some things worse, but it makes a lot of things easier.
Yeah, I think we can stop here. We can pause the here. So I'll stop the recording.
Okay.